This is basically the game, or should I say, Remake.
This video is not about 2024's Mario vs. Donkey Kong. That's a remake of the 2004 game of the same name. 2004's Mario vs. Donkey Kong is a spiritual successor to Donkey Kong 94. That's the one we're talking about here. With some basic web searching, you'll see a few different phrases used to describe this game. Some say it's based on the original Donkey Kong and Donkey Kong Jr. Others see it as an amalgamation of those games plus elements of Super Mario Bros. 2. Me? I call it Nintendo's first remake, and it is an absolute masterpiece.
A remasterpiece, if you will. Remakester-piece? Something like that.
Either way, it's a game that's absolutely worth going back to. I am far from the first person to say this, but as we pass the game's 30th anniversary, let me be the latest to reiterate it. Maybe this will be the final push that gets you to try it.
Go ahead, I'll wait. Oh right, I should actually tell you why you should play it.
This channel is all about the little things, so we're gonna get specific. The Donkey Kong is in the details after all. While there isn't much plot to spoil, there are several puzzle solutions that I'm inevitably going to end up showing here, hence the spoiler warning earlier. But I won't be showing anything from the final 3 zones. Gotta preserve at least some of the mystery, right? Now, let's go to the very beginning. Donkey Kong 94 begins just like the classic arcade game. DK kidnaps Mario's girlfriend Pauline, and the jumping plumber has to save her. This means revisiting the original 4 stages, 25, 50, 75, and 100 meters, as they're called. But even as Mario climbs those all too familiar girders, there are hints that there's something more going on here. Obviously, everything looks different, given that this was on the original Game Boy. What's more, Mario can toss the hammer into the air, catch it, and keep pounding his enemies. And he has a sick 180 high jump and a handstand. All of this means slightly different physics from the way the original game worked. After clearing 100 meters, it happens. In a big "our princess is in another castle" type move, Donkey Kong swipes Pauline yet again and runs off to another location. And that's when the real game begins. All the other stuff was just the tutorial.
Shyamalan would be proud of that twist.
Here's the thing, that twist would be memorable enough on its own. Adding some additional stages at say 150 or 200 meters would be a nice way to cap off a re-release of the classic arcade game. But Donkey Kong 94 is so much more than that. I'm making the claim that this is a remake. It takes everything you remember about Donkey Kong and ramps it up to 11, with dozens of additional levels jam-packed with new puzzle and platforming mechanics. So let's talk about them. Like I said a moment ago, this is where the real game begins, and where the meat of this video begins too. Donkey Kong 94 is puzzle platforming perfection, using the same kind of level design philosophy that made the Super Mario Bros. Series so influential. It's a 4-step system that Nintendo still uses to this day. Game Maker's Toolkit has an excellent video on this concept via Super Mario 3D World. You can hit the link on screen and in the description to learn more. GMTK is a huge inspiration for everything I do here, so definitely subscribe to Mark too. In brief, the 4-step system goes like this. A puzzle or platforming concept is taught to the player, developed with additional obstacles, twisted in some way that challenges the player, and finally thrown away. The first of these ideas taught to the player is the key. I'm talking about the literal one you pick up in-game. The key is more or less the defining item in Donkey Kong 94. Together with the locked door it opens, it's the equivalent of the flagpole at the end of a Super Mario Bros. Level. When you grab it, you can open the exit and move on to the next stage. But of course, it's not always so simple. This is a puzzle game after all. The route from the key back to the door gets more complex with each level, requiring you to let go of the key, throw it, or sometimes even use it as an extra platform. Since the key disappears after leaving your hands for a few seconds, this adds an extra layer to both the puzzle solving and platforming at the same time, Not only do you need to know where to go, but you need to be able to execute those maneuvers along the way. That's how the concept is developed, as we talked about before. New gimmicks are continually introduced, and they follow the same pattern. For example, World 1, aka the Big City, adds these double-ended arrows that turn into bridges and ladders. It's a simple enough concept, letting you cross gaps or reach new heights. But as the levels continue, there's an increasing challenge in figuring out the optimum spots to actually set them up. If you want maximum height or length, then they need to be placed appropriately. By the time you're solving this stage in the desert world, you have to be a master of the mechanic. In the second world, the forest, we're introduced to switches. These can create platforms too, but in an on or off binary fashion. Switches can open or close doors as well. Since they're fixed, the mechanic has to develop in a different way. In this case, opening or closing the switches can modify the path of the bugs that patrol these levels. Sometimes you'll want to let certain ones out while keeping others locked in. The final stage in the airplane world requires you to throw a whole series of switches in a row, quickly guiding the key down a series of conveyor belts.
Now I know what you're thinking, and yes, we have not yet talked about the other two steps of the 4-step process.
As for how these ideas are twisted, each little mechanic has its own puzzle solutions that require you to think outside of the box. But I think the real twist here is in combinations. None of these gimmicks go away as the levels progress. They just keep piling on until you're building ladders, flipping switches, tossing the hammer, and using everything in your toolset all at once to conquer each new level. Donkey Kong 94 is firmly a remake in my mind, but that's not to say that the folks who view it as an amalgamation of other Nintendo games are wrong. Donkey Kong Jr. is here, and he brings those fun climbable vines with him. Sometimes he's the one flipping the switches in a level. The 1-up heart from Super Mario Bros. 2 is here too, and the key carrying mechanic is identical to the way you pluck veggies in that game. Donkey Kong 94 doesn't twist its puzzles so much as it asks you to consider new elements in your solutions.
I know what you're thinking again, and yes, I did say that none of these gimmicks go away. So what about the 4th step?
What does get thrown away are the unique world features. World 4, for example, is a jungle, and Donkey Kong has more monkey friends there who will give you trouble, although you can totally grab onto their tails to cross gaps and reach other platforms. World 6 is the aforementioned airplane, so it only makes sense that there would be gusts of wind that affect Mario's jump physics. You'll have to be just as careful going against the wind as you do going with it, letting the current carry you much further than a normal jump. And of course, there are unique enemies and art assets in every world. Puzzle platforming is the core of this game, but the bells and whistles around it have to be highlighted as well. Every world, biome, theme, whatever you want to call it, feels unique thanks to different tile sets and colors and music. If you're on the streets of the big city, you know it. If you're sailing on the ship, you feel it. If you're in the desert, you hear it. Yeah, the music in Donkey Kong 94 is as good as you'd expect from a Mario game. I need to give a shout out to the 1-up sound effect too. It's probably my favorite variation on that classic sound cue. And you will be getting lots of 1-ups along the way, thanks to a pair of minigames. Pauline's lost items are scattered across every level, and if you collect her hat, parasol, and purse before exiting, then you'll get to play one of the minigames on the next screen. Whether it's a roulette wheel or a slot machine, it's a small respite that gives your puzzle-solving brain a break.
And your gambling brain a chance to shine. I mean, what? I don't have a problem.
Why bother with tacking those on at the end here? For the same reason that Nintendo included them in the first place. Donkey Kong 94 wouldn't be a complete package without them. Going the extra mile is what makes this such a spectacular game. It's what makes it worth a revisit, or a first visit if you've never played it yourself. Donkey Kong 94 could have just been a straight port of arcade Donkey Kong for the Game Boy. And you know what? People would have enjoyed it. It could have been a port with a few extra levels after the original 4, and people would have loved that too. Instead, we got a complete overhaul where the arcade game is literally just the tutorial for a much grander adventure. That adventure could have been more levels with the same mechanics. Instead, it improves everything about the arcade experience with a fresh look and feel, sprinkling in gimmick after gimmick to challenge players with new puzzles and platforming. And since presentation matters, all of those levels are coded in thematic color schemes and musical scores, and bookended by simple but rewarding minigames. It's a complete, polished package. We didn't just get a port. We didn't just get a little bonus content. We got a remake.
Hey, thank you so much for watching this video. If you like what I'm doing here on Framework, please hit that subscribe button in the middle. It would help me out an awful lot if you do. And if you want to see the stuff I've already cooked up, you can hit that link on the far left. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.